We're here at the Baltimore Comic Convention talking to comic writer Mark Waid. Although, you know, I mean, I feel kind of funny just calling you a writer because, you know, your contribution to comics has been so much more than that.
You're very kind. I've been an editor, I've been a publisher, I've colored books, I've lettered books, I've inked, I've done everything short of putting staples in the books, and it's been a long 25 years. But I seem to have acquitted myself pretty well by now.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, you know, while we were off camera, I was gushing about some of your fabulous work. You know, notably Superman, Birthright, Kingdom Come. You know, in fact, tell us a little bit about Birthright. How did you, you know, come up with that particular story? What inspired you to want to write that?
Honestly, it was the last line of the story. It was the last moment of the story. The idea. Spoiler alert: the idea that Jor-El makes this sacrifice, this incredible sacrifice, sending his son out in the void, not knowing if he lives or dies, not knowing if he made the right choice. Because really, is it better to, you know, is it better to doom your kid by letting him stay with you, or send him out in the void and not know what happens? No parent would want to make that choice. I mean, it's a horrible it's a no-win situation. So to be able to get the message back, but just before Jor-El dies, that not only did his son make it to Earth, but he grew up to be the greatest hero that world will ever know. That lets him go with peace. You know, that's where that started, and the rest of it just filled in from behind there when it became, okay, well, how do we redefine Superman for the 21st century? What is the meaning of a hero in the 21st century? What does our readership think of heroism at this point? What's the point of view of a 20-year-old versus a 40-year-old versus a 50-year-old? Nobody under the age of 40 feels like they grew up with Superman anymore. We're losing sight of that. He's not to a lot of younger kids. He may as well be Woody Woodpecker or Betty Boop. That they're not as exposed to Superman. And so how does that? You know, how do I write to that group? What do they care about? What do those people want to hear about Superman? And then Lineal, you, the artist, just hit it out of the park, and it's one of the things I've done that I'm most proud of.
Well, it's fabulous work. You know, we were also mentioning Kingdom Come, you know, which I was just bowled over by all of that. I mean, the complexity of the story, you know, and, you know, the way that you work some of the newer characters. And I tell you what, one of the hooks for that, you know, for me was how Superman is, you know, talking about Magog, and I'm not afraid of him.
Yeah. It was so much. I was going to say it's so much fun to write, but it really wasn't fun to write. It was good to write, but it was very labyrinthine and very detailed and very. I mean, a lot of the character stuff, a lot of the background character stuff in particular, this guy in the background or that gag or this character, a lot of that was just Alex. A lot of times it would just be, okay, here are the 3 or 4 characters we need in the scene, and put whatever you want in the background, and he would put dozens of characters. It's his thing, you know. And it was very much a co-plotting process. I mean, I don't want to ever give the illusion that it was all out of my brain and Alex is just the guy who held the paintbrush. I've always been clear about that it was a collaborative process, and Alex came to the table with a lot of really good ideas and some very clear visions of these characters, and luckily we were on the same wavelength on 99% of those characters. Martian Manhunter was the only one we disagreed on, but that's okay. We're the only 2 adults in history who got into a screaming match over who Martian Manhunter is. But it all resolved, and it's, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that, you know, I don't know that I don't know that it's a legacy book. I don't know that it can really stand on the same shelf as Watchmen or Dark Knight or whatever. But if it can be on the shelf like underneath there, I could live with that. That'd be okay.
Well, you're very self-effacing. I mean, personally, I think it belongs right there beside all that work that you mentioned. You know what I mean? Because Kingdom Come, you know, it was like a watershed moment for comics, frankly.
If you say so. I believe you, sir. Okay, thank you.
Well, you know, and not to get too much into your specific work, I do want to mention, though, a Fantastic Four story that you did, where Dr. Doom basically had to sacrifice Valeria for ultimate power. I mean, that was, I get goosebumps thinking about that one. But in a more general sense, there was something that you said that I really respond to in terms of the nature of heroism today and the way that younger fans look at the work versus, some more mature fans, look at it?
Well, what you have to remember is that what we have to remember is that I was not old enough to remember JFK's assassination, but I'm old enough to remember JFK, and I'm old enough to remember Bobby Kennedy. I'm old enough to remember Martin Luther King, or at least have been old enough to for that their deaths to have some resonance. But those are heroes to me. Those were heroes to me. And they may as well be Abraham Lincoln and Julius Caesar to most of the younger audience. And that's not a put down. That's not a denigration. It's just that's simply the way history works. That to a lot of our modern audience, the definitions of of those guys is they go out, they try to make a difference in the world, and they get a bullet in their head, and that's the reward. And that's heartbreaking, but that's not a point of view you can necessarily argue with. Instead, so it really becomes like, okay, so what is a hero? Why would you do that? Why would you do what you want to? Why would you want to make the world a better place? And for Superman, and I think this is true for a lot of people, but particularly Superman, I think that Superman has the potential to be the most lonely the most lonely being on the planet, because there's no one like him, and people would be so afraid of him under the wrong circumstances. So he's got to earn their trust. But more than that, it would be so natural for him to just hide his abilities and not want to freak other people out and want to walk among us as Clark Kent all the time and hide what he does because he doesn't want to be ostracized. He wants to be, because everybody wants to connect. Everybody wants to feel part of something. Everybody wants to feel part of society or culture. Everybody wants friends. Everybody wants to be loved for who they are. And so it'd be natural for Superman to hide, but at the same time, you can't really be a part of society. You can't really be a part of the world unless you're really embracing what it is that you do. That you can't hide your light under a bushel. You serve the world best by going full out with what you can do and the contributions you can make. And there are sacrifices that come with those contributions. And in his case, it's, their contributions are there are going to be people who are a little bit afraid of him, or the sacrifices are going to be there's some people who are going to be afraid of him. The sacrifices are going to be that there are, he's under scrutiny. The sacrifices are there's so much expectation put on him now. But the contribution is the important thing, because that's how you are connected. You can't, if you can run the 100-yard dash, you can't sit on the sidelines and then feel bad that you're not part of the team. You got to go out. You've got to go out. You've got to put yourself on the line. And to me, that's what a hero is that it's somebody who will put himself on the line to do what he can to make the world a better place.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because the question of the nature of heroism, I think, is central to what's going on with comics today. I mean, for example, Wolverine is one of the more popular characters today. Here's a guy who uses edged weapons. 40 years ago, Wolverine would have had to have been a villain, and now, he's a hero. Where do you see this going for the industry, and how can... do we want to make comic books, sort of a morality play like they were? Because a lot of what I learned about morality came from comic books, and I think that to a large degree, a lot of the readers are getting that same thing, but the message is decidedly different. What do you say about that?
The message is different, but because the messengers are different. As you say, the characters are more violent. The characters are less, seem less ethically driven by yours and my standards. But I think that I don't see that changing. We're not going to turn the clock back and make everybody bright, happy, shiny, nor would I want that. I think the trick is, let's take Wolverine as an example. Wolverine, I grant everything you say, that 40 years ago Wolverine would have had to have been a villain. He kills people, he uses claws, he's a vengeful, violent man. I think the reason that I can swallow that is because I understand his code of honor, and he's been written in such a way where I feel like he's a very ethical human being. He's a very moral-driven human being. I don't necessarily agree with everything he says or does, but I respect, as a character, I respect the courage of his convictions, and I respect, and that's what I need more of. It's one thing to write characters that are violent just for violence sake. Those are the ones that make me cringe and make me, want to wonder why comics weren't like they were when Mommy was still alive. That cynicism of just being violent for violence sake, that's what I need wiped off the face of the map. But there's room in there for characters who are a little more in tune with what our audience expects and wants in terms of action, as long as they're characters who have strong ethic and moral foundations, even if they don't necessarily agree with their ethics and morals. But am I making any sense, that notion that I really, as long as these characters are written in such a way and established in such a way where I understand where they're coming from, and I don't necessarily have to agree, but it doesn't seem cheap or gratuitous or cynical, then I think there's room for those characters, just as there will always be room for Superman who doesn't have a cynical bone in his body, and just as there will always be room for Spider-Man who will, unless somebody screws it up really bad, will never be a violent character. They're just, it's the great thing about it. Spider-Man's a really good example of a bellwether character that proves that you don't have to be full of, you don't have to pop claws and kill people and rip people's heads off to be a popular character. He's still Spider-Man, and he's still there. Everybody who writes that character, everybody who reads that character knows there's lines that character won't cross. And he's still as popular today as he ever was. So that gives me hope.